Hi friends, in the last session we have seen how to use our SQL Server Management Studio editor to connect to our SQL Server database engine and explore different options. In this session, let's see how to create a database and a login user using two different ways. One is graphical user interface and another one is command. Okay, let's go and open your SSMS and connect to your database engine. So enter your server name and choose your authentication and make sure you're using admin account to connect to your server. Now, right click on the databases to create a new database. Click new database and enter your database name. Like let's enter my database name as learn GUI, as I'm gonna show you two different ways. One way is GUI and another way is command. Okay, for every action on the SQL Server. So I am creating a database with name learn GUI and click OK with all the default options. Now expand this database. You will see the new database under the databases list. Now let's create another database using a command. You can We have to open a query window to write a command, right? So let's see how to open a query window. I will show you two ways again. So right click on the database name and click new query, or you can click new icon here to open a query window. Okay, in these two ways you can open a new query. We also have other ways, but I always prefer two ways. Okay, now let's write a command to create a new database. It's very simple. Create database and a database name. I want to choose learn command. Okay, now let's execute. We can execute in two different ways. Again, one way is by clicking on this execute button or F5 button. You can see here in the drop F5, right? So let's click on the execute. So it creates a new database. So refresh this database again to see that newly database. So we got our databases created in two different ways, right? Now let's go and create our login on these databases. So let's go and create using GUI again, because login is of type security, right? So we see logins under security group. Expand our security and right click on the logins and create new login. So before we create a new login, let me give you a brief about this login. So login gives access at server level, whereas user gives access at database level. In SQL Server, we have two types. One is login and another one is user. Login gives access at server level, whereas user gives access at database level. Okay? Yep. Now go and create our login name. Our login name, let's see SQL developer. Now choose your authentication, Windows authentication or SQL Server authentication. So in most of organizations, they use Windows authentication because they maintain domain users and they will have Windows domain groups. But whereas for our learning, we have installed our SQL Server in our local machines where we only use our users mostly, right? So let's go and create SQL Server authentication and enter your password and choose your options, like if you want to enforce password expiration, or if you want your user, like your friend, you are going to create, suppose, this login for your friend and you want your friend change his password because that you are setting their password. So in that case, you can keep this checkbox as is, otherwise you can uncheck these two, or you can even uncheck this one if you don't want to enforce password policy. Okay, now click OK with all the default options. Let's see what happens. Now expand logins to see that newly created login. So we have just created our login, right? So let's go and check what access we got with this for this login. Connect to our database engine again and choose your authentication as SQL Server authentication. Now enter your login name here and password connect. So we have connected. We are able to connect to our server using our new login with default access permissions. Let's expand our databases. Now let's try to access our newly created databases now using our SQL Developer login. So let's try to expand this. So the database Learn CMD is not accessible and even GUI is not accessible. Why? Because we haven't mapped any user permissions on the login. So let's see how to grant access on these databases for our newly created SQL Developer login. Now go back to the admin permission instance connection. Now expand this and go to login and double click on the login to open using GUI. So now go to server roles. I don't want to grant any additional permissions on the server level. I want to grant the new user access on the database level. That's why we have to go to user mapping. Now choose the databases that you want grant access on. So I want to grant access on these two databases that we have created. SQL Developer can use the two new databases that we have created for him. So I want to grant access, like we have many roles here. These are database roles. You can learn more about these database roles in later sessions, but at initial stage, uh, I don't want to cover or confuse you giving more information on this at this time. Okay, so let's grant a DB owner permission or DDL admin or whatever. So let's grant DB owner permission for now. So with this role, this SQL developer gets DB owner permission. That means he can do anything inside the database. Okay. Now let's click OK now. Now try to go back to our previous SQL developer connection, refresh the connection and go expand the databases and try to access our new databases. So he is able to access, right? So expand. So he is able to access. So now we have created our new databases and we have created logins using GUI. So let's see how to create this login and user mapping using command. So let me close these windows and open again, new. So I want to grant access, sorry, I want to create another login, right, using command. Before we're going to create a login using command, let me give you a brief about a database, system database here. So expand the system databases, then you will see four different system databases that we get by default when we install SQL Server. So out of this, master database is the very important and heart of SQL Server database engine because it maintains system information and all the metadata information in this master. That means whatever we create inside in on the SQL Server, like just now we have created our database and we have created our logins, right? So all those information will be stored in this master database, sorry. So SQL Server database engine uses this default master system database to get to identify all the information and to show you all the information that we have created, all the objects that we have created. Okay, so as we are creating a new login, and as I mentioned, login is gives permission or access at server level, whereas user mapping is at database access level. So we have to choose database master first before we create login. Okay, because we are creating login at server level, right? For server level, not at databases level. So we have to make sure we are using the system database before we create login using command. Okay, now go means it indicates the end of the statement, it indicates the end of a batch, right? Okay, now execute. So you see you can, the database name has changed here. So this is GUI. If you want to choose a particular database, like if you want to connect and use a database for SQL queries or to explore, to write, to use that database, then you can, this is the GUI option. Like you can see all the databases in this list. You can connect whatever you want, and then you can write queries. This is GUI and this is command to connect and use a particular database. So initially the connection that we made to the database engine is at server. This is not a database, right? This is server, and this query window is using database connection. So before we create a login, we have to use our system database. Now we have connected to our system database, and we want to create a new login on this database so that the login gets access at server level. So, like we created a database using create and just login, and then use your username, like database name, create database name. We just need to create login name, login name, mm, like SQL dev. Okay, SQL dev, and of course we have to give a password, right? So let's give a password with password equal to in single quotes. So we have to give any value, input within the single quotes in SQL Server, and double quotes is not supported in SQL Server. So for this type of assignment, we have to follow single quotes within the single quotes. So enter your password here. So I'm gonna change my password next time because you are seeing my password, right? Okay, so yeah, that's it. Let's execute this. So it creates a login SQL dev with password, my password. So now execute. Or if you want to execute only these two lines, then you can select like this and you can click this one. Or F5 is also work. Now execute. User does not have permission to perform this action because we are we have connected as SQL developer, right? So let's go back to our admin connection. Control X, cut, and then go back to our admin connection. Now take new query there and then paste here and execute here. So created successfully. You can check that in the logins. Now let's go to security and refresh. So you see here SQL dev, right? So we have created our login, and so we have just created our login. Let's see how to, let's see whether we are getting the required permissions or not. Database and SQL Server. So here SQL dev, and by the way, SQL Server is not case sensitive. You can use uh, all small case or upper small, whatever you want. It's not a case sensitive. SQL Server password by default. So we have connected using our new login. Let's expand the databases and you can't access, right? And also you can't access any of the master database as well. Okay, now let's create user. Now username on master, username SQL dev user or dev for login SQL dev. So we are creating user for this login on this database. Okay, so this user controls access at master database level. So just execute these two lines so that user has been created for this login on these databases. So this user controls permissions access at this database on this login using this login. So okay, so if you don't, if you are confusing with this, just ignore, no issues. This is not a mandatory to for SQL development. It's just a basic session before we continue to the SQL development learning. Okay. Now that we have created our login and user at master level, that means server level. Now let's go and create the same thing at our databases level. So let's copy the previous commands. So we have no need to copy the login. We just copy the use master and use SQL dev. So let's change that to learn CMD and then create user SQL dev for login SQL dev. Create user SQL dev for login SQL dev. Yep. And then so it's created SQL dev user for this login on this database. And then we have to map permissions on this database, right? We just created with all default options. We haven't actually granted any additional permissions on this database to this user. So we have to create uh, a role. We have to grant a role on this database, that is db1 role, right? So for that, alter, we have to add role, alter role db owner, add member, that is SQL dev, right? In this role, I am adding this user. That means in this database, I'm adding this user a db1 permission. So this is how it works. Now F5. So we have granted access for SQL dev on this database as a DB owner. So let's change this to GUI and execute again. So created. So let's see this in GUI now. So right click on refresh. Now to see that, you can go to security, logins and SQL dev and you will see this. Now go to server roles, you will see only public, and then user mapping, you will see databases that you got access. So you got access on learn CMD, learn GUI, master, and so on the master you got only public. When you choose master, you are seeing only public role. But when you seeing selecting the two databases, you are seeing DB owner permission, right? So this is how we grant access on the database level. So now this user got access on learn GUI and learn CMD databases that we have created in this session. So don't get confused. and don't bother if you don't have good understanding on this, how to create login and user. You can follow, and SQL Server especially has very good GUI, and most of the developers, trust me, most of the admins and developers follow GUI rather the SQL commands most of the times. Okay, so don't get confused, don't be worried, just focus on what you are understanding. And please comment if you have any questions, and please like, share, subscribe to my channel for more videos like this and to continue this video series. Thanks a lot for watching my video.